So, anime. Let's talk about it. So if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know how much I love cartoons and animation, but there's one genre/art form that up to this point I've never really touched upon all that much, that being anime. Anime is something that I think has become such an influence in the entertainment industry, inspiring all kinds of creators and fans in both obvious and subtle ways. And while I've watched my fair share of shows from the land of the rising sun, I'm far from an expert on the subject, and there's tons of other channels here on YouTube that could dive into this rich history and subject matter better than I ever could. The other main reason why I've shied away from the subject is that I found that, in general, Western TV shows, animation in particular, are much easier to review because most of them are in episodic format. Of course, there are exceptions, but for the most part, most TV shows have episodes with one-and-done plots that you can watch pretty much in any order. Not so much so with anime. Most anime that I've watched take the serialized approach where one episode leads into another. Even so-called filler episodes will tend to have that one plot thread that continues the overall story arc of the season to the point that you pretty much have to watch every episode, and if you miss a few, you'll be lost as to what's going on. So for as much as I like shows like Sailor Moon, Tokyo Mew Mew, Shugochara, Azumanga Daioh, and so on, you're probably never going to see me do a top 10 list for these series because in trying to cherry pick just a couple episodes, it would require me having to sum up a ton of plot information just so the general audience would understand what was going on, and yeah, you can start to see why my channel has mostly been an anime-free zone. But today, we're breaking some rules. Over the past few years, there's a word that I kept hearing being passed around as I tried to branch out and watch other movies and shows beyond just America. A word that kept being muttered in anime circles. Precure. Precure this, Precure that. This was a great season of Precure. You gotta watch Precure. If you like Sailor Moon, you'll like Precure, and on and on. So of course I had to go and see what all the fuss was about, and it turned out that Precure wasn't just a singular show, but an entire franchise, and everyone seemed to have their opinions of which seasons were better or worse. So it was then I decided, much like my Doctor Who marathon back in 2014, which you could see my top 10 list of here on this channel, I was going to give myself a year to watch every single season of Precure, and in 2020 I managed to do it. Oh, 2020, the year that everyone would rather forget. I don't think any explanation is needed to tell you how stressful of a year 2020 was to everyone on the planet, to put it mildly. When I started this marathon on the 1st of January, I, like probably everyone else in the world, couldn't have imagined what was to come, which makes this all the more ironic when I say that for me, 2020 was the perfect year to marathon Precure. Why? Well, let's start by explaining what Precure even is. It's a magical girl franchise that's been ongoing for over 15 years now. Every year is a new season, and with each season comes a new batch of heroes, villains, a new plot, and a new overall theme for the season. Any of you who are fans of Power Rangers will probably understand this formula perfectly. Precure is basically Power Rangers, but marketed primarily for girls. And while each season starts anew with little to no connection to the previous seasons, there are main staples that carry over. Team members who are color-coded for your convenience, fairy companions that give the girls their magic weapons and items and act as cute fuzzy mascots. Sometimes there's a 6th ranger that shows up partway through. They get upgrades to their attacks and gain new items as time goes on because of course we gotta sell those toys. You get the idea. In any case, being the rough year that 2020 was, I have no doubt that Precure was one of the main things that got me through it. This is a franchise that is unapologetically optimistic. Even in the seasons that dared to go a bit darker with its subject matter, there was always a light at the end of the tunnel. These were characters who never gave up, who always found a way to turn a situation around, who found ways to redeem certain villains, and who boast the power of friendship theme like no other. If any of you were fans of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic and you were sad to see the show end and you're looking for something similar to fill the void, I think Precure is your answer. So for this countdown, we're going to be taking a look at my favorite seasons of the franchise, as well as some of my favorite characters, attacks, transformations, theme songs, all that good stuff. Keep in mind that I'm not going to be able to go to the Challenger depth on any of these entries. I don't want to spoil too much. This is just going to be a general overview of the seasons and why I like them. If you want a more comprehensive and detailed in-depth analysis of each season, then I highly recommend the channels Magical, Azenzome, and Tyranno's Watching All the Precure playlist. These are the channels that helped me to discover this franchise, and hopefully by the end of this video, maybe you'll want to check it out too. I hope you do, because these are my top 10 favorite seasons of Precure. Number 10. Futari wa Precure and Max Heart. What better way to start off the countdown than with the season that started it all? Futari wa Precure, which roughly translates as Both of Us Are Precure, aired back in 2004 and became an overnight success, and it's probably due in large part to one main factor. Rather than an over-reliance on magical weapons and attacks, though they do gain a handful of them as time goes on, the girls just straight up attack the monsters of the week with their bare fists, showing off superhuman strength the likes of Superman would be jealous of. We're talking like original Powerpuff Girls level of violence here, something that the magical girl genre doesn't do too often, strangely enough. Needless to say, both for the executives at Toei and the general viewing audience, heads were turning for sure, and it was this hands-on approach to the fight scenes that remained one of the key components to every season that came after. But of course, the weekly battles weren't the only draw. Much of this season's success also came from its characters. Our main heroines are Nagisa and Honoka, two middle school girls who at first seemed to have nothing in common with one another. Nagisa is the hot-headed, tomboyish, sporty one, while Honoka is the calm, quiet, level-headed one with a love for all things science. They both knew of each other, but otherwise had no reason to ever talk to or hang out with one another, until both of them are visited by magical fairies who inform them that they are the chosen ones, tasked with saving both the Earth and the fairy realms from the Dark King, and so they become Cure Black and Cure White. What made this pilot season so unique was the fact that we weren't just following one main character, as is par the course for most magical girl shows, even ones that eventually form a team a la Sailor Moon. This time we had a duo, a pair of polar opposite girls who, due to circumstance, have to learn to get along in order to save the world. They really hammer home the power of friendship in this season. Even their transformation and finishing attack requires them to have to hold hands. Their powers literally do not work unless they're together, which not only leads to some interesting plot contrivances with the villains trying to find ways to separate the girls, but also helps Nagisa and Honoka realize just how much stronger they are together, and the closer they become as friends, the more they find they're not so different after all. The series proved so popular that when the first season finished, it got a sequel, Futari wa Precure Max Heart. A series getting a sequel season would only happen one other time, and we'll get to that later. But since Max Heart is just a continuation of the same show, I'm just putting them together here. This season would see the addition of a new team member, Hikari, who turns into Shiny Luminous and acts mostly as a supporter to help give Black and White powers an extra boost. She serves as a nice mix between Nagisa and Honoka's more polarizing personalities, and for me, she's what made Max Heart overall an even better, more engaging season. I won't lie, Futari wa does kinda suffer from first season syndrome, which is why it's only at number 10 here. Seeing as how this was the season that eventually led to an entire franchise, it's clear the creators were still trying to figure out what the formula was even gonna be. The yin-yang theme is clear but very basic. The main villain has next to no personality beyond take over the world, and his henchmen are just as bland. And the fairies have cute designs, but their voices and personalities get really really annoying really fast. But the great action scenes, the likable characters, and the developing friendship between our main heroines more than makes up for it. Also, this season's theme song is, without a doubt, the best and most memorable and catchy of the entire franchise. So while much better seasons would come after it, if it wasn't for Futariwa's overnight success setting the stage for things to come, they might not have come at all. Evil servants of the dark power, return to the darkness from which you came. Number 9. Mahoskai Precure. Precure meets Harry Potter. That's basically this season's theme in a nutshell. Mahoskai, which roughly means magician, or Maho girls meaning magic girls, or as some fans call it, witchy Precure. Come on guys, pick a name and stick with it. Follows the story of a girl named Mirai who one fateful day meets the acquaintance of a girl named Liko who turns out to be a witch in training. Soon enough, Mirai finds herself becoming entangled in the world of magic and sorcery, and when an evil wizard tries to take over the world, Mirai will have to enroll in a wizarding school to learn how to harness her own hidden magical talents, and thus she and Liko become Cure Miracle and Cure Magical. Like I said, if any of you out there are or were into Harry Potter at some point, you'll probably love this season. Seriously, they're not even remotely coy about what franchise they're aping off of. From a seemingly normal kid discovering the world of magic, to a boarding school for witches and wizards, to having to take a special train to get to said school, to having a rule where the main characters have to keep a magic a secret from the normal human world, to a town where you buy your magical items from, the list goes on. But just calling it a ripoff would be too harsh, I think, as the magical girl twist and monster of the week fights gives it a bit more uniqueness. Much like I said about Futariwa, my main criticisms with this season comes from its mostly forgettable villains, and I guess the showrunners must have agreed with this sentiment, because halfway through they defeat the big bad of the season, and then suddenly we get a completely different, even less interesting main antagonist for the second half. At least the first big bad was given a slightly more fleshed out sympathetic backstory, that being a former teacher at the magic school who got mixed up in the dark arts while trying to protect people, which already makes him a more interesting than Futariwa's Dark King. Another complaint about this season that gets tossed around a lot, and that I agree with, is that more time is spent in the human world versus the magic world. Mirai goes to the magic school for all of 10 episodes, and then Liko comes back with her to the human world and attends school with her. On occasion, they'll pop back over to the magic school whenever they got a problem, but for the most part, the plot sticks to our normal, non-magical world. Now, on the one hand, I can understand why the writers would have the girls go back and forth. It makes sense to put both the main heroines in fish-out-of-water situations so they can learn more about the other and strengthen their friendship. And that is what happens for the most part. I just think there wasn't enough going back and forth. The scales really needed to be evened out here. You guys created this super cool magic school that I would take over Hogwarts any day of the week, and then you proceed to kinda just sit on it and only tease us with it every so often. What the heck, guys? But for all my harping, also much like Futariwa, what made up for its shortcomings and made this season greatly enjoyable was its characters. Mirai's childhood teddy bear Mofrun gets magically brought to life in the first episode, making her one of the more memorable and unique fairy companions, as she's one of the few fairies who was created rather than born. It's also nice to see a teenage protagonist who still carries around a stuffed animal for comfort and isn't made fun of or shamed for it. Speaking of fairies, the girl's other companion is Ha, who we literally see grow up as the series goes on. She starts off as a baby, and as the girls learn responsibility by taking care of her, she grows into a sweet and energetic person who marvels at everything around her and will do anything to help others. And much like the intro of Shiny Luminous, Ha eventually transforms into the lovely Cure Felice. But this season's strongest aspect is its main duo. Mirai is an energetic girl who's bursting at the seams with curiosity and is always up for learning something new. And though she has a natural talent for magic and kinda sorta is basically a chosen one, the other characters don't worship the ground she walks on or anything. She's still treated the same as any other student, makes mistakes and has to earn her upgrades, and takes every lesson she learns to heart. She's the perfect counter to Liko, who goes through an even bigger character arc. Since she comes from a family of famous and accomplished magicians, she has a bit of a superiority complex at the start, believing that she has to be the best at everything she does. But as time goes on, she begins to realize, yeah, who am I kidding? I suck at magic and everyone knows it. But owning up to her weaknesses helps her to not be such a perfectionist all the time, and with help from her friends and sheer determination, she rises to become one of the most powerful witches in the world. The bond these two form is so strong it literally unites two polar opposite dimensions of reality, proving that friendship really is magic. Number 8. Doki Doki Precure. Okay, you're probably wondering, what the heck is a Doki Doki? In Japanese, that's generally the sound effect used for a heart beating, which would translate this season as heart pounding or heartthrob Precure. But no, the main protags aren't seeking romance or anything. The heart part of their name is actually in reference to this season's theme, that being the question of whether you go for or against what your heart tells you. More on that in a second. In an alternate dimension ruled by magic, the evil King Jigoku destroys the kingdom with pop singer Makoto, aka Cure Sword, as one of its few survivors. She, along with a group of pixies, then travels to Earth to bring together a team that can help her restore her kingdom. She finds her saviors in the forms of spunky student council president Mana, smart and bookish Rika, martial artist and millionaire Alice, and later the super serious and mysterious Augury. And once they become Cure Heart, Cure Diamond, Cure Rosetta, and Cure Ace respectively, it'll be up to this team of 5 to fight against the dark forces corrupting people's hearts and save the world. For many fans, this was a really divisive season. You either liked it or you didn't, and since this season made the list, you obviously know which camp I fell into. It seems most of the hate stems from 2 characters, Cure Heart and Cure Ace. Oh boy, Cure Ace. I don't want to spoil too much, so let's just say that when this 6th Ranger makes her first appearance, it was a debut that made many people quit the season, mainly for how she comes almost completely out of nowhere, and that a lot of fans were hoping that another certain character would be the next team member instead. And the showrunners must have anticipated this, because in subsequent episodes, they go out of their way to basically explain via some plot threads why Ace was introduced in the fashion she was. But I think just the opposite. I really came to like her, and as time went on, it made sense why she came into the story the way she did. While I can understand some people's criticism, I appreciated the writer's decision to take a chance and try something different that the audience wasn't expecting when it came to introducing the 6th Ranger. The other big red flag that Doki Doki's detractors love to bring up is the belief that our main heroine, Mana, Cure Heart, is a Mary Sue, i.e. a character that everyone seems to love, who is seemingly perfect in every way, makes no mistakes, and can do no wrong. And to that I say, I think not. While Mana is well respected in her school, there's plenty of times where she takes things too far and her friends call her out on it. Heck, Cure Ace doesn't even seem to really like her at first, forcing Mana to have to prove her worth to Ace, both as a Cure and as the leader of the team. And when she does make the occasional blunder, she owns up to it and works to fix it. I think people make the misconception of her being a Mary Sue because of just how overall cheerful and helpful she is. She's constantly trying to do the right thing and help everyone she can, to the point that it's arguable that if she's nosing her way into other people's business and trying to fix things that aren't even really her problem to solve. But I think this isn't a case of her being quote-unquote perfect or anything. Rather, this is a character flaw she has to work through. And she does. It gets to a point where she literally collapses from exhaustion, forcing her to learn how to depend on other people and to not let her peers take advantage of her generosity. Which leads back to this season's overall theme: selflessness and selfishness. After the previous two entries on this list that had a big lackluster antagonist, now we're getting into the seasons that had much more engaging villains. This time around, we get a team of evil generals that are all loosely based around the 7 deadly sins, and they use their negative influence to blacken people's hearts and give in to their more selfish desires. Regina was definitely the standout of the group, with a semi-complicated backstory that made her interesting and sympathetic. To try and explain it would spoil a ton of plot twists, but let's just say that her mischievous personality made her a fan favorite, and her connections to Cure Ace played a part in the love it or hate it attitude towards this series. Even the origin of the big bad of this season comes from a place of pure tragedy, showing how a single selfish act could lead to devastating consequences. But it's not all that black and white. Throughout its run, this season has each of the girls facing a personal obstacle that they have to overcome to better themselves as people, whether it's Rika becoming a doctor, Alice deciding if she wants to take over her family's company or not, Aguri learning to be a team player, or Makoto dealing with the grief of her fallen kingdom and finding her inspiration to sing again. Each of the girls makes selfless and selfish decisions, and we see the good and bad consequences of both. True, in general, it's not good to be a selfish jerk, but sometimes you really do have to take care of yourself first. If you're like Mana and take your selflessness too far, you can wind up burning out, giving away parts of yourself until there's nothing left to give. Or worse, have people take advantage of your kindness and make you do all the work, then make you feel bad when you tell them no. As the old saying goes, sometimes the worst mistakes are made with the best intentions. It's a hard lesson to learn, and this season presents the moral of finding a middle ground between the two extremes brilliantly. Oh, and quick side note, the Pixies aren't annoying and actually helpful. Their human forms are adorable. Cure Rosetta uses her riches to provide the team with all sorts of insane gadgets, basically making her the Batman Precure. And to add to the comparison, she has a faithful butler named Sebastian, who, second only to Alfred Pennyworth, is the greatest butler character I've ever come across. He's a kind and considerate mentor while being super hilarious at the same time. Basically, think of Professor Utonium for the Powerpuff Girls, but if you were a butler and you got Sebastian. Seriously, I would watch an entire spin-off show just starring him and Alice and all the misadventures they'd get into. Well, no matter how polarizing of a season it was for some people, I'd still gladly recommend it to anyone getting into this franchise. Poor souls who have lost their love, the Doki Doki team will get your heart racing again. NumberSeven. Yes, Precure 5 and Yes 5 Go-Go. So remember when I was talking about Futariwa and Max Heart and how there was only one other Precure series that got a sequel season? This is the season I was referring to. And much like Futariwa and Max Heart, I'm also lumping Yes 5 and Go-Go together, since Go-Go was just a continuation of the previous show but with a new villain and a 6th ranger added. After Futariwa, Max Heart, and Splash Star, more on that later, the showrunners decided to take the franchise in a new direction by abandoning the duo gimmick they had going on and take a more Sailor Moon approach by having a team of 5 instead, hence the title. And their gamble paid off, as this has become one of the more memorable and well-loved entries in the series. A magical dimension called the Palomir Kingdom is attacked and destroyed by the Nightmare Corporation, an evil business empire that's determined determined to take away everyone's dreams. Thankfully, 2, later to become 3, fairies manage to escape capture and come to Earth to assemble a team of heroes to save their world. They find their champions in carefree and optimistic Nozomi, sports and jewelry-loving Rin, aspiring actress Urara, book-loving Komachi, and rich and intelligent Karen. And together, Cure Dream, Cure Rouge, Cure Lemonade, Cure Mint, and Cure Aqua will find their friendships tested as they fight to save the world and make their career dreams a reality. Much like Doki Doki, this was another season where the theming was strong, but not so much to the point of being blatantly shoved in your face. The butterfly motif on the team's outfits and their transformation phrase of metamorphose goes perfectly with this season's overall theme of careers. Over the course of 100 episodes, if we're going to combine Yes 5 and Go Go together, we get to see each of our 5 main protagonists forge strong friendships with one another, and in the process discover what they want to be when they grow up. In many aspects, this season is pretty realistic in showing the ups and downs kids go through as they try to forge their own path, with the girls having all sorts of different interests and struggling to narrow down to that one special thing they want to do. There's many episodes where they fail or their interests change and they wonder if they're talented enough to even enter the career path they thought they were on. Rin is the most athletic girl in school, but her true passion is making fashionable jewelry. Urara already has a career going, that of an up-and-coming child actress, but later finds a passion for singing. Komachi wants to be a novelist, but struggles to write anything worthy of publication. Karen is a talented musician, but later finds an interest in the medical field. And as for our main heroine Nozomi, for the longest time she has no clue what she wants to do, and bumbles her way through all sorts of wacky situations as she tries to find something she's good at, but her passion for helping others and giving everything her all may just be Earth's salvation. Quick side note, I also found it kind of cool that rather than relying on some magical fate, though that kind of sort of plays a tiny part, it's primarily Nozomi who assembles the Yes 5 team. She just straight up asks her friends, "Hey, you seem pretty cool. Do you want to become a superhero with me?" How often does something like that happen? Our 3 main fairies for this season have also become kind of ironic, both for good and for not so good. This was the first time in the franchise we had the fairy companions taking on human forms to disguise themselves on Earth, with Coco posing as a teacher, Nuts opening a jewelry shop, and Milk eventually becoming a student alongside our heroines. Oh dear Lord, Milk. Much like Cure Ace, she's another fandom-dividing character that you either love or hate with a fiery passion. She starts off being a teeth-grindingly annoying spoiled brat, and for many fans, she alone soured the viewing experience for them. And while I can understand the hate, I personally didn't find her that bad. She had a really rough introduction, but as time goes on, she does start to improve little by little. And by the time Yes 5 Go-Go comes around, she turns into a far more tolerable character, to the point of becoming the Sixth Ranger, Milky Rose. We also have a fairly memorable and effective antagonist this time around, that being Nightmare, a literal soul-sucking corporation with a range of lackeys who have sacrificed their hopes and dreams to do whatever it takes to climb the corporate ladder and one-up the competition, all to keep in the good graces of their boss, and every one of them aren't above backstabbing each other to get what they want. Welcome to the world of capitalism, kids. They serve as a great foil to our heroines, who are constantly helping to build one another up, supporting each other's dreams and retaining their uniqueness and individuality. Though, if I'm being honest, Bumby is like one of the funniest villains ever. The way he begins the season as a straight-up threatening presence, but gradually gets broken down as time goes on to the point of kinda sorta befriending the girls, was hilarious to watch. I practically let out a cheer when he reappeared in the anniversary episode of Hugato. More on that later. Unfortunately, and oddly enough, for as popular as Yes 5 was, its sequel season Go-Go did terribly in the ratings, and by terrible, I mean like it nearly ended the franchise, which I find kinda head-scratching because I didn't find anything wrong with it. I mean, it didn't really bring anything new to the table other than the addition of a new team member, but it certainly wasn't awful. I thought it was okay. Maybe the audience was just getting tired of these characters and wanted something new. We may never know the exact reason, but in any case, Go-Go marked the end of the first era of Precure, and because of the disastrous ratings, the executives made it a point to never do a sequel series to another season again, no matter how popular or good it does in the ratings. Which is kind of a shame, but in the end, maybe the decision was for the best. Better to have a good show end on a high note rather than dragging it out and milking it dry. Well, no matter what the opinions may be on its sequel, this was still a quintessential season that altered the direction of the franchise pretty much forever, with the power of hope and the light of the future. Number 6. Heart Catch Precure. I know, blasphemy, right? The fan favorite and so-called greatest season of Precure is only my number 6. But hey, if you've watched any of my other top 10 videos, then you probably know by now that I always seem to have that one entry that many are probably going to disagree with, and, well, here we go again. For a season that became one of the gold standards of the franchise, why is it only midway through my list? Well, let's get to the plot first. In each person resides a heart flower, that is, a flower that represents a person's personality and soul. These heart flowers are also connected to something called the Great Heart Tree that watches over everyone. Protecting this tree are the Heart Catch Precures who defended against the evil desert apostles who planned to wilt everything and turn the world into a desert. However, when the current Precure Yuri, aka Cure Moonlight, is defeated in battle and the heart tree loses its flowers, she sends 2 fairies down to Earth to seek out her replacement. They soon run into Sabomi, a super shy, flower-loving girl that's just moved into the city with her family. Eventually, she's joined by her energetic, fashion-loving friend Erika and martial arts master/student council president Itsuki, and together these 3 become Cure Blossom, Cure Marine, and Cure Sunshine to help collect heart seeds to restore the Great Heart Tree again. Make no mistake, this is both an important and overall wonderful entry in the franchise. There's a reason that when people ask how to get into Precure, most fans will point them towards this season as a great jumping off point. It's widely considered one of the darkest or at least most mature series in the sense that it wasn't afraid to tackle subjects that would be considered heavy for kids, and thankfully it never talks down to its target audience. Part of this stems from the fact that for the first time in the franchise, the villains didn't use inanimate objects to create monsters, and instead transformed actual human beings, which instantly upped the stakes more than usual. We also got the first real significant actual on-screen death of a heroic character, that being Cure Moonlight's fairy partner. Even our main leads this time around were given a bit more depth than usual. Tsubomi is one of the more unique pink team leaders in so much that in most Precure series, the pink lead is typically super energetic and sociable and perky. Not so much so with Tsubomi. Everything you typically expect with a pink lead, she's the total opposite. She begins the series like the living embodiment of MLP's Fluttershy. She's super shy, super quiet, and beyond super awkward when it comes to socializing with virtually anyone. She's constantly worrying if she's doing the right thing or not, and in the earlier episodes is constantly fumbling around and screwing up while trying to fight monsters. Even her own fairy partners at one point call her the weakest cure they've ever met. Ouch. But very slowly, as time goes on, Tsubomi gradually gains more and more confidence in herself, and no matter how hard things get, she never gives up, until she eventually, well, blossoms into an effective leader who saves the world from total destruction. Part of this gradual transformation is due in large part to the help of her friends. This show's pacing is done rather well, with characters that each go through their own arcs and development at a believable rate. Erica is the bombastic, energetic one who admittedly I found kind of annoying at first, but she always has good intentions when trying to get Tsubomi to try new things, and as time goes on, she matures as a person and learns to take her mission as a cure more seriously. Then there's Itsuki, who dresses and acts more masculine at first, mainly because she's filling in at her family's dojo while her sickly brother recovers in the hospital. But her inner secret love for fashion and cute things begins to show itself until she feels more comfortable in being her true self. We also got Tsubomi's grandma, who acts as the team's mentor, considering she used to be a cure in her youth, as well as a ton of side characters who aren't forgotten about and continuously show up in other episodes. And then there's Yuri, Cure Moonlight, another fan-favorite character, and for good reason. The tragic loss of her fairy partner is what kicks off the entire show, and it takes a long time for her to reconcile with her past, as well as the emptiness left behind by her father, who mysteriously went missing. Her slow journey of working through her failure and grief made it all the more satisfying when she finally gains her self-confidence again, and without spoiling too much, her connection to one of the villains was a bold move that no series up to that point had done before. Speaking of the villains, unfortunately, here's where the criticism's gonna creep in. For as much as I've praised this season, here's where we get into what ultimately brought it down a peg for me. First off, the villains are a mixed bag for me. 2 of them are great, and the rest are just okay. Professor Sabark and his creation Dark Precure was far and away the most interesting and memorable of the bunch, mainly for the plot twists surrounding them that I won't spoil. The other 3 generals are just fine. They have entertaining personalities, but their motivations don't go much beyond take over the world, and as for the main big bad Dune, he barely appears at all, to the point that I remember virtually nothing about him. I honestly think they should have dropped him and just had Professor Sabark be the real big bad, as he was far more well developed than anyone else. And then there's the fairies. While they're not annoying, they're also just kinda meh. The main 2 I always had a hard time telling apart since they look so similar, and as for Cologne, if the main thing you're famous for is dying, there's kind of a problem. Also, and I'm not joking, the fairies literally poop out the magic MacGuffins of the season. Maybe kids find this joke funny, but for me it was not only beyond gross, but at certain points would ruin an otherwise emotional moment. You'd have a scene with 2 characters contemplating the monster they fought or learning a life lesson or something, and I'd be like, "Aw, this is such great writing," and then suddenly, "Here comes the magic doodad, fart!" Like, who the heck thought this was a good idea? I swear, if they had just taken out this one aspect, then this season would have ranked higher on the list. Well, I guess it goes to show that even the most so-called perfect shows have their flaws. Did I still think this was a great season? Yes. Would I still recommend it to newbies wanting to get into the franchise? Absolutely. Despite my couple hang-ups, the excellent plot pacing, the relationships between the girls, and the massive amounts of character development more than make up for it. Check it out and watch them heal the darkness in your heart with their light.